We got freedom to gain, we feed them the game. Turn on new freedom exchange, we freeing your brain. They trying to shackle your mind, no half of us blind. Remember the past, but never go backwards in time. The ancestors lived through us, they help us build a model community. New Africa is soon to be. So tune in to Sister Marsha, Mujahideen, Man Bilal, to get your cultural enlightenment.
Alhamdulillah, I love that opening. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I open with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and open by offering to you the Muslim greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum. And welcome to another episode of The Power of Educating Our Own, a program brought to you by the Clara Mohammed Schools Network, right here in the United States of America, where we have an estimated 19 schools in our network. And those schools include weekend schools, online schools, and full-time schools in the association of Imam W. Dean Mohammed. We welcome you to this program. And today we have a great show for you. So I say to you, go gather up your family, gather up your friends, and join us today for the power of educating our own. Our topic today has to do with how are we strategically planning the space for our young people. In our masajid and in our schools, there is a way to do it. Did you know? So we're going to give you tonight a map to make that happen. And that map is going to be by one of the experts in our communities, Sister Aida. And Sister Aida is going to come on and share with us some of her experiences with planning spaces for young people in schools and masajid, and then give us the formula that we should all use as we look to what makes the space that we occupy for our children safe, what makes it fun, what makes it inviting. I bring to you Sister Aida Johnson. Welcome.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me well? I'm hearing a little bit of feedback.
Oh, are you? I hear you.
Okay, let me switch perhaps. Okay, can you hear me still?
I still hear you. Yes.
Okay, great. I can hear better now. But yes, thank you so much. I am excited to talk about my favorite topic, which is designing spaces and more specifically interior wellness, which is the idea that our spaces impact us both physically and mentally. And so we should stop thinking of them as just kind of like putting up some pretty things, but think of them more as something that is really going to impact us on a deeper level and something that we actually interact with every day. How many times do you sleep in your room? Every day. How many times do you come into your space? How many times are you at your schools? How many times are you at your masjids? And so when we think about that, we can say, okay, that's either going to impact us both negatively or positively. It's going to do one or the other. When you go into a well-designed space, you feel something. You feel good about that space. You feel good about staying there. You want to stay longer. And so if we think about design in that way, then I think that we can give it the proper amount of attention that it truly needs.
I love it. And I love the way you say that interior wellness. So she's educating me along with you, dear audience. So
yes.
Interior wellness, that is such a healthy way to look at this. And, one of the reasons that we thought it was important to focus on this is because we don't want space that we've just thrown together. So I love the idea of thinking it through. And then for that to be considered interior wellness, I love it. So let's talk then about what is it that we need to consider when we're looking at, let's say, I know you probably want to consider your audience. Who am I designing this space for? Who am I creating this space for? So if you're a teacher creating your classroom or an administrator creating this space in the whole school, because it also contributes to the culture, or a community. I won't just say the imam, but the community that is creating the space for our children. So I'm focusing on our children because while the space needs to be inviting for everyone, I think it really needs to be inviting for our children. So let's talk
Absolutely.
about what are the first things we need to consider when we're looking at this interior wellness designing.
Yeah, so for me, it's intentionality. The first step is intentionality. It's asking yourself a set of questions. The first one, like you said, who am I designing for? Who is this space for? If my space is meant to accommodate little people, let's say K through 5, if my space is supposed to do that, it should reflect that in the design. So I need to immediately start kind of training my brain to think like that. The second one is how do I want to present myself to them? If this is like a fun play space, then it needs to look like that. If this is a more structured classroom, then it needs to look like that. And then we need to move accordingly. I think that especially with young people, like you said, when they see something, they get excited. They tell you they're excited. Oh, look at that. Look at the pictures. Look at the colors. And so they get excited. They can feel your intentionality. They can feel that this space is meant for me. And if they feel that, then you will get a better outcome for them. So the first thing in design, I would say, is intentionality. Once I understand what I'm trying to convey in my space, is this a calm reading corner, right? So that's going to look different than maybe a science lab. That's going to also look different than maybe a library or the cafeteria. All of these spaces need to have their own personality. They need to have their own feeling as they move through the space, because it's intentionally, and I don't know, I think some people do it unintentionally, but it's intentionally telling the participant, the person who's in that space, how to feel, how to operate in that space. Right. And so if it's dark and gloomy, then I'm immediately going to feel a little bit, I hate to say solemn, because there is a space for dark and gloomy. I love like a dark and gloomy room. Why? Because I'm kind of coming in and kind of becoming more peaceful, more introspective. But if that's not the way that I want to convey that space, then maybe I won't use darker colors on the wall, for example. Maybe I won't use heavy fabrics and draperies, because why? I want it to feel perhaps light and airy for children. So all of those things kind of come into play when we're discussing interior wellness and how to be intentional about in design. But for me, I like to say the biggest cornerstone for design, and something that's relatively easy and cheap to do, is the color of your walls. Once you do that, you immediately, a gallon of paint can paint a, let's say, a 10 by 10 room, and it's $36. You can get a gallon of paint for $36. If you have to muscle through it, you can do the actual painting, and it will immediately change the look, feel of your space. And so for me, that's where I start. Anytime I'm talking to somebody, I start with that paint color.
Wow, I love that. So I hear several things in this. The lighting, I hear you when you talk about dark and gloomy
Mm-hmm.
versus light and airy.
Mm-hmm.
You're So the lighting, the color, and
Mm-hmm.
then what's occupying the space.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are looking at our classrooms, at our schools, and I hear you when you talk about even the type of space matters. So a cafeteria won't be designed like a lab, a science lab.
Right.
A science lab is not going to be designed like the Islamic studies classroom. The Islamic
Exactly.
studies classroom is not going to be designed even like the hallway.
Absolutely.
Yes. So now we're looking at the lighting, the colors, um the things that we're putting in this space. We're
Mm-hmm.
looking at who we are designing for. And so
Mm-hmm.
we walk into the space. How do you determine what it will look? You talk about the intentionality. How do
Yeah.
you determine what that looks like?
Yeah, communication. So, for example, if I'm doing a school, alhamdulillah, I've had the opportunity to work on a school, and it all started with what first talking to the teachers. how do you like your classroom? You know, and I think that teachers have pride. I think that that's one of the things they love to design. You know, at the beginning of the year, most teachers are going to have a theme. You know, if a teacher likes a specific animal or like a specific color, the teachers are going to want to bring that in. And so I want to always keep in that in mind because I want the personality of the teachers to shine through. But I also want it to be a space that functions well. And I think that sometimes, especially with schools that may be smaller, they're using areas as a multi-purpose room, right? And so this area might transition from one thing to another. So now I'm having a little bit of a challenge, right? Because each room, like I was saying, has to have its own personality, has to have its own space. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, something went down the wrong pipe.
Okay.
So when I'm designing this space, I am talking and communicating. One second.
Okay. And while she's getting that out, I want you all as listening audience to go ahead, drop us a note in the comment section. Tell us where you're from, you know, what might be your questions. Who are you? Are you an educator in the classroom or an administrator? Because that will also help us as we go along. We're having a conversation. So this is not just an interview. This is a conversation. And we want you to feel free to join the conversation by dropping your notes in the comments section.
Absolutely. And I think I'm good now. So we'll
Okay.
roll back. So yes, I'm going to be intentional with the questions that I ask. So I'm going to ask the teacher, what is she trying to convey in her classroom? How does her classroom or his classroom function? What ages are the students? And so once I get all of that done, then I kind of know where to go with that. If I'm dealing with things, let's say there's already things that we have to keep in the room. Let's say this is just not like a complete overhaul. Then I'm going to also work around those things as well. I'm going to try to figure out, okay, how can we incorporate these things, but also bring in a new and fresh perspective to the space. So, like I said, it's a series. It's wrapping for me. If it was just me designing, I just go. But for me, I am actually. It's like I'm trying to embody the person. I'm trying to embody the student and the teacher. How would they function in this classroom? How would I like to function if I was a student in this classroom? Okay, if I'm doing little ones, maybe like kindergarten, they're not going to want to sit down in one space all the time. So maybe I'm going to have a few different seating options, some bean bags for them, some little toadstools so that they can kind of have some of those as well.
Mm.
Maybe like a couch so that maybe 3 or 4 people can sit down. If the teacher maybe does story time, then I'm also going to have a rug and maybe a space for the teacher to kind of have those circle times or story times. So I'm just thinking about the functionality of it. And then for me, I love whimsical design. So I'm always going to put some whimsy, some fun into the design just because I feel like why not, especially when I'm dealing with the little ones. So maybe that'll look like, a mural if I can find something like that, or a wall decal, or just like a space that maybe one wall is like brightly colored and maybe it has all of their names on it. Just something so that it feels as if this is our space. This is a space that we're going to spend a lot of time in. I think that children spend almost as much time in school as they do at home if you're not counting sleeping hours. So we want to make sure that those spaces are very intentional and just make sure that they aren't just like an afterthought. And I think that that's
Mhm.
a place that we can kind of do some improvement, especially in our community, and especially, in sacred spaces like masjids and musallas and things like that. We could just be more intentional about how we're designing it and how we're inviting and the experience that people are getting when they come into those spaces.
I love it. So we're looking now also at the functionality. I love
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking about a teacher's classroom that I went into.
Hmm.
And I remember when I immediately went in there, I saw a lot of beauty in the
Hmm.
classroom, but I told her, I said, I feel like if I was a little person in this space, that it's confining.
Mm.
And the next time I went back into her classroom,
Yeah.
so before she just had a lot of desks with I'd say it's children looking at the back of other children's heads.
Right.
And she changed it. She changed the whole look where she put the tables side by side so that the children were in, like, I call it community, because they were
Yeah.
sitting now at tables and they could look at each other and have
Mhm.
conversation. So she converted it so that those desks form these little talking areas. And she had like 3 of those.
Yeah.
Same amount of children, same amount of space, but it was open too and airy. So how do
Mhm.
you go in and decide, okay, I need to make the best use? This is a small space and I need to
Right.
make it feel bigger.
Mhm. How do we make a space that's small feel bigger?
Or a space that's big and it looks like, oh,
It's just a little bit of stuff in a
yes,
big room.
yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's where our space planning comes in. So if you have a small space, the best thing you can do is just be strategic, not having big, bulky items, right? So, for example, if you can, instead of having maybe, like you're saying, instead of having all those individual desks, making a table is a great use of your space, because now are you, maybe each desk had to have maybe 3 feet between it so that people could walk past. Now we've eliminated that, right? Now we just have one desk that everybody is going to be able to sit at. Another thing that by doing, taking away the desk, mentally we have taken ourselves from an individual standpoint. This is my desk, my space, and we have intentionally or unintentionally made it, like you said, a community. So now everybody is sitting at the desk. I think that even the shape of the table, if you have, let's say, a rectangular table, then automatically you're having 2 heads of the table, right? And so in our minds, we're thinking these are the leaders, these are the people. So strategically, like in conference rooms and things like that, you might see that because you want, maybe the person who's leading the conference room or the meeting to sit at the head. But in a classroom, I think a round table would be best use of space. Why? Because there's no head. Everybody is, sitting around. And so in our minds, we are now using that space as, okay, we are not, there's not individualism because we're not at our own desk. This is my desk. Get out of this space. We don't have that. Now we're moving it into kind of a community. So, for example, let's say for me in small spaces, I love modular furniture. So let's say a table that converts to something else. You know what I mean? Let's say it's a table. I know some tables, they actually go from a high table to a lower table. So you can kind of the way it's almost like on a hydraulics type of thing, and you can lower it. So, for example, let's say we have that table, and for some classes, and this might not be the case for all, but they actually eat their lunches in that. So let's
Mm-hmm.
say, for example, we had a table that was high, and then for lunch we converted it low. So now we've used that same exact space, but we've made it feel different. We have, made it more interactive. We've made the mindset of the people who are sitting high. I'm sitting high at the table. That means that it's study time. The table is low. Now I know it's more, talking, more engaging with the people who are around me. So for me, I like to have in smaller spaces things that are on wheels. So perhaps instead of a standing desk for the teacher, maybe we have something that moves on wheels and she can push it to the side. Now we're just reimagining how to use our spaces in really big spaces. Let's say like a multi-purpose room, and maybe we're not using it in that manner, but people still have to come. How do we utilize that space? And for me, I like to make little almost like nooks. So in one space, maybe we have a rug. And so we know in that space, that's going to be kind of our, story time. If they're younger and they're still doing story time and things like that. Maybe in another section, we have a set of pillows and bean bags. So this could be our reading time. Maybe in another space, we have a table. And so this is where we're doing our work and things like that. And so now we've allowed for the room to have its own spaces, and we can use things like rugs to delineate that space. So maybe one space has a nice round rug and another space has a rectangular rug. And so the kids know that, okay, if I'm over in this space, I use it this way. If I'm over in this space, I use it that way. And we've taken a huge space and broke it up so that it's kind of like its own little pieces. And so it doesn't just feel like a big, vast space and area. So like I said, it's intentionality and just being creative with what you have.
I love it. let's go into the worship area.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So
Yes.
today I was at the masjid and
Mhm.
someone said they think that the musalla, the worship area, should be only for worship and
Mhm.
children should not play and bring toys into the musalla. And in my mind, I was cringing because I espouse to a different theory. And I believe that we make our spaces inviting so that the children will say, can I go back?
Yes.
And that they will not pull away when you're bringing them there. They will
Mhm.
find joy in that space. So, in designing our worship areas, that sacred space that you talked about,
Mhm.
it is sacred.
It is.
How do we, what kinds of things would the imam and the community think about
Mhm.
in making that musalla, that sacred space, inviting for children and feeling like a great place to worship for the adults?
Yeah, that's a challenge, right? Because I can understand both perspectives. Of course, for me, since I have little ones, I want that space to be inviting. I want that space to be welcoming. I know that my son enjoys going to the masjid because he gets that's like his time to be with other people. He loves going there. So for me, I want to keep that energy. And so sometimes I think that when we put those hard lines, it can be abrasive, and especially if we are encouraging everybody in our community, and a lot of us have children and grandkids and little people who we want to be in that space. But I can also understand as the musalla in a place where you might be coming, and then it goes back to how each individual is using that space. Some people are coming there for an introspective moment. They're coming there for a quiet moment to perhaps read Quran, to pray extra prayers. And I can understand how, if that space is, with children and toys, how it can take you out of that. So in that case, I would say it would go with the majority, I would say. Like, okay, how can we use this space? And then also try to say maybe, how can we again kind of section out some pieces. So perhaps not the whole musalla is open for toys and children. Perhaps this side of the musalla and somehow blocking it off. I know that especially at Atlanta Masjid, we don't necessarily have partitions and things like that, but perhaps after Juma, you can roll in something. And so, now we have a little area. Hey, kids, let's stay in this site so that those who are coming for just the worship, and I believe that there's many forms of worship, but just the salah part, or just the Quran reading, they're able to also, kind of utilize that space as well. So, I believe that a musalla is, yes, we most of the time we're coming there to make our salat. So yes, we want a space that feels, ready for us to do that. We're not necessarily, wanting to have some of the distractions that perhaps children can bring. But at the same time, I think there's a time and a space for both. And I think that's why, for example, we have other areas as well, like the mother's room, that perhaps that can be a space for children to go in. Or maybe we can reimagine a completely different space that is a playroom in that area, and that could leave, more space for the musalla to be what it traditionally is.
I love it. Another thing about the musalla, and I've traveled to different communities and
Hmm.
noticed different things about our communities.
Hmm.
What's hanging on the wall?
Hmm.
Because when we're making salat, we don't want anything that distracts us from prayer. What's hanging on the
Absolutely.
wall? And then,
Hmm.
since you're talking about the Atlanta Masjid, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I
Hmm.
know in our musala we have a lot of classes,
Yes.
and so you will find around the room the whiteboards, but those
Hmm.
whiteboards are encased.
Hmm.
And so, it's like a cabinet. You open a
Yeah.
cabinet up to the whiteboard,
Hmm. Hmm.
which I think is a great way to utilize the musala when we're having, exactly where the classes are, and we're able to section people off for that. So
Absolutely.
deciding what goes in the musalla and what makes it, because you say you want it to be inviting, you want to section it off, but what really should we be looking at putting in that sacred space? What's the real design like? Should it be like ours? You know, we have the attributes and we have the
Yeah.
prayers on the wall as wallpaper at the top, and I love what you have behind you now.
Yes.
Even, but so just thinking it through. That's what I really want for our audience. Like thinking it through. What should that worship area truly include?
Yeah, so for me, and I'm not speaking on anything, I'm no scholar or anything, so I don't even know if there's a science behind how musallas have to operate. I'm sure that there is, I'm sure that the minbar has to be like facing the Qibla, all those type of
Yes,
things.
yes.
But outside of those things, just design wise, I think that the quality and care for the carpet I think it's like a really huge thing that I think that we may think about, but may not. But the quality, like a good pile on our carpet, right? I think it's so important because not only are our foreheads and faces meeting that carpet, on a daily basis, we don't want to have any distractions when that happens, right? So let's say the carpet is like a knotted rug or something. That immediately is going to be abrasive. That's going to be something that takes me out of that salah, right? So I think that having quality carpet in every musalla is like number one. Carpet that has like some thickness to it because oftentimes we're sitting for long periods of time during Juma or during classes. So making sure that those carpets are good. I've also been to some communities where they have optional, almost like yoga pillows. And I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're just kind of like round pillows, and everyone who wanted one could take one. I think that that's a very um, intentional thing to say, hey, come and sit a while, right? Because we want people to stay, we want people to sit a while, and we don't want them to be uncomfortable. And I think that we cater to people of many different ages, of many different abilities. So that is another one. Obviously, having chairs for those who need to sit in chairs. I know that during classes, we have that option to bring in chairs. So I think that that's a great option. But making sure that those chairs in every musalla are easily available and easily obtainable for those who may need those chairs. And then for me personally, as someone with little ones, I would love to see a station with like pens and paper and things like that for the little ones who are inside the musalla during, a 30-minute to hour time period to be able to kind of write and do quiet activities. I'm not saying bring in noisy toys and things like that, but wouldn't it be nice if we could just, maybe they had some coloring and maybe they're coloring attributes and things like that. And we had crayons, things that wouldn't necessarily mark up carpets, so no paints and things like that. But I think that that would be just like another level of intentionality to say, hey, come on in. We recognize that we are catering to a large community, a large audience. Here are some things that we could have. When it comes to the walls, I personally think in a musalla, less is best. I think that we shouldn't be putting things that are very distracting, even color wise. So for me, if I had a bright orange in a musalla, to me, that would be distracting. That would be the energy that I would say not necessarily the right energy for the space. So making sure that we're using cool tones, so like your greens and your blues, even your purples and things like that are on the cooler side to get us in that mind frame for what the musalla is and what the musalla truly is. And then, like I said, just making sure that we are having space for everybody. And, I know that bookshelves and things like that are really important because we're constantly taking Qurans on and off the shelves, or different Islamic studies books on and off the shelves. So having quality bookshelves that are, make sure they're accessible for all. So even maybe a little bookshelf where like some kid books, and those things would, to me, elevate the musalla experience, because I feel like we've been operating on the same level for many, many years. And I think that it can be reimagined and reused so that it is making sure that we're catering to everybody in the community.
Great. Thank you. If you've just tuned in, you are watching The Power of Educating Our Own. We are talking about interior wellness, designing spaces in our schools and our masjid communities that are inviting to children and inviting to everyone, really, but especially children, because we believe that the children deserve our attention when we're looking at spaces. I love the fact that you talked to, and we have with us Sister Aida Johnson, who is an interior designer. Did I say that correctly? Is that the correct one?
Absolutely. Yes, interior designer, and I specialize in interior wellness.
I love that concept.
Alhamdulillah.
When you talk about colors,
Hmm.
and so right now, dear listening audience, we are talking about the musalla itself and the
Hmm.
design and the look of a
Hmm.
musalla that caters to the worshipers as well as the growing and coming up worshipers, our young people.
Yes.
And, sometimes that can be a challenge and difficult, especially when we have a lot of young children who run around, and I can just see children who come into the musala, and it's an open space. It's so inviting.
Yes.
It says, "Do a flip
Yes.
and
Run the
another
length.
and
Yes.
another. Yes, leap through here." I can see
Jump.
that. I see the joy of that because I have older friends who can still do cartwheels, who have done cartwheels in the musala because
Why
it's just,
not?
they said I couldn't help myself. Okay, I understand.
Yes.
Um, and I know we want that joy in our spaces, and we also want respect of our
Hmm.
spaces. And I think it's
Hmm.
important for us to be reminded of that. I
Hmm.
love how you said we want to make sure we have reading materials, and those reading materials are placed well, not just on the floor, but on a
Hmm.
shelf, on a bookshelf. I love the idea of having reading materials for children.
Yeah.
And as you were talking, I could picture Islamic literature for children in
Hmm.
the musalla because that's something I haven't necessarily seen. I love the idea of the colors. So I'm saying to you, dear listening audience, go ahead and drop us a line if you have questions, comments you want to share with us, and we will definitely make sure Sister Aida hears them. I would like to go back, Sister Aida, and focus on colors
Yes.
because you went through that really fast. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
okay, purple. I'm trying to keep up what you're
Just think
saying.
some of
Let's
it. Right.
let's talk about
Mhm.
colors and what colors do for the spirit, and how do we pick the best colors for our
Mhm.
spaces.
Yeah, so like I said, color and paint color and your wall color is going to be like the biggest impact that you can have on your space. So for me, that is where the most intentionality and that's where the most direction is. So for example, we can have brighter tones. So what do brighter tones do? Like oranges and reds, they're invigorating. So when we talk about that science lab, we might want to use some of those colors. Why? Because we want the thoughts of the all of that to just be like exciting and pops of color. So that is where we kind of get those um tones. And so the oranges, the reds, all of those tones are going to be for that. When we talk about more serene spaces, we're talking about our blues and our greens and things like that, so that we're allowing for there to just be a calmness among the space. And so when we talk about a musalla, or when we're talking about a library or reading nook, for me, those are the colors that I will lean towards. Then we have like our neutral colors, like our creams and our tans, also our grays. Those are tones that are going to allow for the space to be more of an empty vessel. So whatever we want to make of it. So like for example, you go to a museum, the walls are white because we want the art and things like that to shine. So for example, if a classroom, an art room, and we're going to hang up a bunch of the artwork from the students, we might want to keep in mind to keep that space neutral to allow for the artwork to shine. Then we have some of our earth tones like browns, our tans, and things like that. And then those are our more grounded colors. So even for spaces like a musalla, those will also be colors that I would reach in because we want that grounded feeling when we are in those spaces. So for me, it's about making sure that you know what you want in that space. If you are a person, like I'll go back, if you're a person who loves like a moody room because you just like that feeling, then you're going to know I'm going to go to this section of colors. I'm going to use my darker shades and my deeper, richer hues because I want that feeling when I come in. I want it to almost be like a cave, almost just kind of like a snuggled in space, right? If I want a room that is very inspiring, then I'm going to use those brighter, richer tones because those tones, have, and these are all scientific facts. These are scientific facts that colors evoke certain emotions and certain feelings when we're in those. So I think that having those different colors is a great way of allowing our minds to immediately we come into that space, our mind comes into a different space as well.
Wow. Okay. All right. So moving from the Musala, we've done some of the classroom. Moving from the Musala, when you walk into a school space or we're designing the space, and I know some of our schools are inside of our masajid,
Mm-hmm.
and some of our schools have their own independent space.
Mm-hmm.
What should we consider that makes the school distinct?
Mm-hmm.
And, when you first walk in, what should be there that says this is a school,
Mm-hmm.
this school is about business,
Right.
and this school is about whatever that mission is? How do we identify those things just by looking at the first impression of the school?
Yeah, I think that every school should have like a waiting area that you enter, especially maybe not necessarily for students all the time, but especially when parents and things like that are coming. And I feel like it should be almost lobby like, right? So when we go to a doctor's office, we don't immediately go into their office. We have, a transition point. I think that in our minds, we're taking this serious, right? We're like, okay, let me sit here, let me get my mind right about it. I know that the proper channels are going to be taken, right? As opposed to when we walk into someone's home, we're walking right in. Why? Because it's familiar, it's comfortable, it's that. And so I think that we have to strike that balance because, yes, we want the school to feel like a community, like a home, but we also want it to be, hey, this is a place where, serious stuff is going down. We're training and teaching and all of that. And so we want that respect that comes with that. So for me, every school should have kind of like an area that comes before the actual school comes, almost like a lobby. So that allows for maybe just a small couch and someone to greet you. And then, so now we have someone to greet us. Now we're forced to interact because, as a school safety reasons, we want to make sure that everybody who's coming into that space are people that we are. Making sure that they're supposed to be here. So I think that immediately in any school, that's the first thing. The second thing is I would love a space for like I know kids and especially as they're going into their classrooms, a space for like their jackets and all of the things, just so that we can make sure that organization is there because I think that a well organized school and especially classroom is a school that functions and works properly. So if we're thinking about all of the storage things, okay, how do the kids come into this class? Okay, when they come in, we know we're going to have cubbies and things like that for their book bags or jackets. And so they immediately know where to hang those. And it's not an eyesore, it's not just like thrown everywhere because that immediately is communicating something to the students. It's telling them that perhaps we're not as put together as we should be. And then we have to think about that visual clutter is also mental clutter and so that they're not cluttering up their mind with just seeing all of these things. Like if we have too many things on the walls or too many, you need to have some empty space. That's another thing, is that we need to have space that is just free, so, because it allows for your mind to kind of have a break. When you have too many things on the walls, it can become overwhelming. So making sure that we're just really thoughtful about making sure when you first come in, that this is a space that we intentionally made for you to come in. We intentionally made for you to walk in here and be welcomed. I think it's an important piece to when you first walk into a school.
Wow. And is there a particular color that works better in that receiving area?
Mhm. For me, I would probably lean more towards the neutral colors and earth tones when I was coming into that space. Especially, and it also depends on where. So when I did do a school, as a matter of fact, I made sure that that space actually did have some more color, but that was because they catered to a younger audience. And I wanted the younger audience to immediately come in and feel really excited, like, wow, this is like a space for us. If this is a school like Mohammed School of Atlanta, I would say that caters, there's a one building for K through 8, and then there's the other building for high school. I would design those two welcome areas totally different because for the high schoolers, what I know is they want to feel adult. They want to feel like, we are a little bit different than we've left that building. So I would make theirs like look more almost like a cafe, like something that they can be excited, like a little bit maybe more moody, a little bit more older, because we want them to be in that mind frame of, hey, you are young adults. You know what I mean? This is who you are. You've left that other area. Now you're moving into this young adult space. So I would design that area totally different than I would for the K through 8, where I might make it a little bit more brighting, more exciting, and say, hey, we still want you to be, cater to that inner child, and make you excited about coming in here as well.
Wow. 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 Okay. So when you're thinking about designing and giving this interior wellness, let's look at this concept of interior wellness.
Mm-hmm.
Why that terminology? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing you as you're talking about what we're doing, but how does this interior design contribute to one's wellness?
Yeah, so I want to go back to what I was saying. We interact with our spaces every single day. Think about that. And when we think about that, just like we invest in our health, we need to invest in that as well. That's a part of it. What we see, you don't understand that how in a space that may be cluttered, or in a space that may be designed, well, the organization and the functionality is not there, how much that actually is like a little bit of, I want to say microaggression, but that's not what I want. That's not exactly it. But it's a little bit of frustration that you deal with every single day, and whether you know it or not. Um, if a space every day you have to kind of like inch yourself in, and it just doesn't, like, you have to like go around things, or maybe when you walk you might bump something because it's not, the space planning isn't there. Those are little things, little bit of frustration that start to add up every single day. And if we think about it like that, then now we understand, okay, because when I say the word design, it sounds optional. It sounds like, okay, I might be able to get to that. I might not be able to get to that. When you say interior wellness, you're saying, no, this is something you have to do. And it's not about money. It's not about like dumping a bunch of money into it. It's about it's about intentionality. So if I know that when I come into the house, I have a problem with losing my keys. Now I've made an area where I immediately put my keys down. That is a little bit of frustration I don't have to deal with. And it's also something that deals with design. So now I might, hang up like a little area that has like several hooks that I can put my jacket, my keys, my purse. So now I have eliminated a little bit of frustration from my life, And so when you think about design in that way, like, I know that accessories and styling and things like that is a way to bring your personality into a space. When you feel like your space is something that speaks to you, you're happier. You feel better in that space because you look at it and you say, I tell everybody, if I don't go into your home and don't understand you a little bit better, then you need to do something different. I should go into your home and understand you, because your space is indicative, it's a representation of who you are. So when I say wellness, I say that in a very serious way, that we should be looking at the design of our spaces as something that's critical to the health, that we have every single day. We're interacting with this every single day. Our spaces need to be healthy. Air quality, we need to be making sure that the air quality in our spaces, we need to be making sure that lighting, for me, I like to have a lot of different lighting. Why? Because in the daytime, I want it to be light and bright. In the evening, I want it to be a little bit dimmer, a little bit darker. I'm telling myself, now it's time to relax. I'm telling my body, now it's time to calm down a little bit. I'm telling, my kids, hey, that dim light is in. Now we may bring our voices down a little bit. We're preparing our minds for what is to happen, which is sleep and rest. I think that in every space I put plants. Why? Because that's our health. It's not just pretty, which it is. I love plants because of the aesthetic look of them, but because of the health benefits that plants have. I do things like try to study feng shui and how we move in through our space and how our spaces are impacting us in that way in space planning and functionality. So when we think about all of that, and yes, all of that looks nice, when we do it right, all of that looks pretty and we enjoy looking at it because it looks nice. And so the prettiness of it is there. We want our spaces to be beautiful. We want to beautify our spaces, but that's one part of it. It should also, speak to us on a different level as well.
Wow. Okay. So I hear the interior wellness for home.
Mm-hmm.
Can you bring that into the school setting or the masjid setting? I hear you saying about frustration, about winding down for the day and setting up the space to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Can you transfer that then just to a school or a masjid? How does interior wellness work for those that setting?
Yeah, so for in those spaces, I would say they are just as important, if not more. We're catering to a large audience, and so we want to make sure that when someone comes into those spaces, they feel one welcomed. So what does that look like? That may look like, for example, having uh, most of the times people have a woman's, especially in musallas, there's a woman's side and a brother's side, right? A sister side and a brother's side. Making those sides equally as beautiful. I think that that's one thing because I can't tell you how many times I've been to different masjids and those two sides aren't equal. Let's just say that. So immediately I don't feel welcome, right? Why? Because there wasn't intentionality. It doesn't feel like this felt like an afterthought. Maybe they don't want, the sisters here or the children here. Why? Because our space isn't beautiful. Our space isn't big enough. Our space isn't, it doesn't have some of the amenities that another space would have. So I think that that's number one, making sure that we're catering to everybody, the men and women of
Mhm.
the masjid, so that they both feel like they are welcome when they come into that space. I think that things like I was telling you before, the color of the space is very important because I think that it tells us that, hey, how am I supposed to feel in here? Am I supposed to feel bright and chipper? Am I supposed to feel a little bit calmer? Am I supposed to be in a relaxed state? And so the color of the space is like vitally important. And then how it functions. If I'm going around the space and I don't really understand how I'm supposed to move in the space, then that too is a missed opportunity because again, those are those little pieces of frustration that we're trying to eliminate. And so the flow, okay, so naturally when someone comes into the masjid, naturally they're going to probably want to go make wudu first. Let's say that. So how do we make that flow so that that's very clear where it's at? We are making sure that there's no frustration and trying to figure out, okay, wait, is it this way? Is it that way? So signage in spaces like musallas and masjids is very important. I know that I've gone to a masjid before and the rug was just like, there was no directionality and I was the only one in there. I was like, wait, which way do I pray? So just little things like that was just like a little moment that I was like, oh, that's a missed moment. There has to be some delineation in the rugs or something to tell me which way I should be praying. Otherwise, now I have to pull out my phone, pull out an app. What if I don't have it? Am I just trying to pray anywhere? Just those little things are things that we have to think about. So for me, I think it's important, just like you would do a site visit for like a construction project. I think that it's important to walk through the space. Walk through the space with multiple people. Let's walk through the space with the elderly. What are some of their their pain points? Let's say that when you enter the door, there's a space like this big, and so now they have to step up, and so for our elderly community, that might be an issue. So now we need to figure out, oh, wait, we actually need a ramp here. Or perhaps we need to figure out how to redo this. Okay, so now we're going in, or maybe someone trips every time they come in because, oh, they didn't see this spot. All those things are design, right? That come down to design, but these are also things that are really into the functionality of the space. And so we're not always going to have the opportunity to, be there on the ground level, maybe when the architect designs the space, but we can also, just be very intentional about, okay, every space needs to have windows. We need to be able to see outside and the sun to come in. And I think that even musallas could have this. If we really thought about that, I think that it's important to just have windows and spaces that can be opened up so that the air quality can be good in those spaces. So just those little things I think that we need to start thinking about when we're thinking about designing masjids or redesigning masjids in schools, because I think that we've been functioning on like a model that to me is a little bit antiquated and outdated. We can think about these things now. We can think about, how this is impacting us.
I love it. And you hit the nail on the head. Look, I had a question. I'm like, oh, she just answered my question. Because when you were talking, two things came to my mind. One, the idea of when you step into the space and no one's there to tell you, how do you know which way to pray?
Yeah.
So just that simple thing of, and I even did that in my house. So when people come, they say, which way is the Qibla? And I'll say to them, look for the sort of Ayatul Kursi. That's what's on my wall. That's in the direction of the Qibla. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you know that. And even in my home, we have a rack that has all the prayer rugs on it. Nice. And I have a basket of scarves and a basket of kufis and all of that. So I hear you when you talk about that intentionality and giving that space the welcome feeling. Also, the other thing that came to my mind when you were talking, it was about, why do people come to the masjid? Yes, we have to worship. Yes, it's a part of what we do as Muslims and servants of Allah. But there are people who go for healing.
Yes.
They come to the masjid to center themselves and to find themselves and to overcome whatever challenges they may be experiencing.
Absolutely.
And sometimes even they come with their family because now they want a central place that they can do something together.
Yeah.
And so I hear you when you talk about that intentionality and you talk about the well-designed space that is looking as this interior wellness. And so even when you talk about wellness being a place that feels good, that's healthy.
Yes.
That is what that healthy is.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so I thank you for that reminder to us. And we have Sister Akil, who says that your expertise is needed at all of the masajid as well as all of the schools. Inshallah, others will receive this insight with the respect it deserves. Inshallah. Thank you, Sister Akil. Yes, absolutely. We agree. We agree. Inshallah. And that's why we're doing this program, with the prayer that whoever Allah blesses to receive it, they will receive it well. And that as we travel and visit one another, we can feel the beauty in our spaces and feel even our own sense of identity. So even when you look at, this is exterior and this is off subject, but on subject. When you look at what we're doing here in Atlanta, and I look at the mural that was just put up at the masjid, we have our sense of our identity as African American Muslims. So those colors that we use, so we have the Muslim identity because you have the mosaic, the Islamic designs in there, the squares and the triangles and all of that. That's a part of the geometric shape, Islamic design, right?
Yeah, like
but those colors,
yes,
those colors are ours.
Absolutely.
The Pan-African look, right? The red, the yellow, the green, the black. So those kinds of things, I think it defines us. And as you said, you help to identify who is occupying that space and a little bit more about us, about the persons occupying that space. And I'm saying that to say that when we travel to communities, we should see a sense of us in the space. And so we should know that that's a Muslim, yes. and that's also African American Muslim, or that's a Pakistani Muslim,
Mhm.
or that's a Muslim from Senegal, or we should be able to see something in there that says that about us. So I think that's beautiful that you're
Absolutely.
saying that, and that's also contributing to that identity that
Yeah.
we have. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I think that when we speak about Atlanta specifically, there is very few communities that I think are similar to our community. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that we should be proud of that. And I think we should showcase that and speak about that at every turn. And I think that that's the beauty of Islam, though, right? Because it allows space for that. It doesn't say everybody has to be the same. It says as long as you
Right.
keep your culture, as long as it doesn't conflict with Islam. And so that's what I feel like we're doing is we're keeping our culture and our pride within our culture as long as it doesn't conflict within Islam. And so I think that that's a really a wonderful way. And I love to see everybody's culture displayed. I love to go to different communities and seeing how they express themselves within Islam. It's a beautiful thing. It's something that I think we should highlight, not hide from.
I love it. Absolutely. And so we're coming up in the last few minutes of our program. And I thank you so much for bringing this subject to us. I agree with
Mhm.
Sister Akila, I think it was, that we need more of this.
Mhm.
And I am going to yield now to you for anything you think is most important that you need to share with the audience, the
Mhm.
takeaways, like make sure you do 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is,
Right.
such that they have those final thoughts.
Yeah, I think that one is, I think just training our brains to think of design as not something that is for the elite or something that is for people who have a bunch of expendable income. I think that we should start looking at design as something for everyone. Everyone has access to it. Everyone should have this because, like I said, if we think about just some of the frustrations that may come with not having a well designed, well functioning, healthy space, then we can understand just the vital importance that it is to be able to beautify our spaces, make our spaces our own, and make our spaces well. So just kind of retraining our brain, number one, that hey, do I like my space? Does my space serve me well? Is my space something that is it shows who I am. And if you can say no to any of those, then I just challenge you to rethink what does that look like for you? And that could be, hey, do I like going into my classroom? When I went to the masjid, there was this one thing that I wish that we could change. I might want to bring that to someone. It starts there, it really honestly starts there. Number two, determine how you want your space to feel, not look. So if I say I want my space to feel calming, now I do something else. If I just say I want my space to look nice, I don't know where I'm going. I have no idea what direction that is. But if I say I want my space to be exciting when I go in, now I'm thinking differently. So instead of I want my space to look, say I want my space to feel. When you
Mhm.
start using that vocabulary, now you can have more intentionality and more direction with where you're going. Once you do that, like I said, paint, 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 paint. Paint is the most inexpensive, however, most impactful thing you can do. So once you ask yourself how I want it to feel, now you put yourself in a category to which paint colors I need now, right? Because, like I said many times, there's certain categories for certain colors. Now, once I've done that, now for me, artwork is the most important piece in your house. That's where you get your identity from in your house, is what artwork you're putting in there. For me, in my space, I want people to come in and see that yes, I'm Muslim, yes, I'm African American, and yes, I like an earthy feel. That's who I am. That's what I like, and so I'm going to have that indicative in my artwork. That's where you're going to see maybe family. That's where you're going to see all of these things. So make sure that your artwork is it can be anything. It can be your favorite fabric that you put in a frame. It could be a recipe, a page from a recipe book that your mom passed down to you. So now you hang that up in the kitchen. All of these things are things that you're doing to your space, but you don't know. When I look at that, I feel good. I feel warm. I feel the presence of my, of people who I love. And so that's going to immediately make me feel a little bit better about being in the space. I put plants in every single room. I don't think that there should be not one room that doesn't have plants inside of your room. Your plants not only look beautiful, but they also help with your air quality and overall health of your space. And then lastly, I would say lighting, light bulbs, right? And so maybe not just having one ceiling light, but also put some table lamps, some floor lamps. And so now I'm able to move through my space instead of having, for me, I usually never like to have yellow lights unless I'm going for a dimmer look. So maybe in your table lamp, when it gets a little darker, now I'm turning off like my very bright white lights and I'm turning on my more yellow, more warmer toned lights. So now that my lighting is setting the tone, setting the mood. So all of these things are relatively inexpensive, but as long as you are spending some time to think about it, it is going to have such a huge impact on your space.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. And ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to and watching The Power of Educating Our Own, hosted by the Clara Mohammed Schools Network. And we have been talking today about interior wellness, talking about how are you designing your classroom, your school, your musalla, your masjid spaces. And we have the expert with us today, Sister Akil. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so
Alhamdulillah.
much for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you again next week and every week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on the NFN network, the Clara Mohammed School, Facebook, and YouTube. Come on over. We'll see you next week. Thank you so very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sister Clara Mohammed, a black Muslim woman from Macon, Georgia, was an extraordinary leader and pioneer. Her contributions, especially in the development of Islamic education in America, paved the way for thousands of Muslim families to take ownership of their children's future, starting at a time when homeschooling was illegal in the United States. She eventually established a network of schools that was later named Sister Clara Mohammed Schools in her honor by her late son, Imam Warith Din Muhammad, rahimahullah. Sister Clara Mohammed helped to establish the important role women had in early Muslim American history and was an inspiration to future generations of leaders. Without her, there would not have been a nation of Islam, or the unique Sunni Muslim community that evolved from it, one that was acutely aware of the concerns and aspirations of women. May Allah have mercy on Sister Clara Mohammed.